Hello Traceable Designers. Today I'm going to show you a modification for the ornate-scalloped Lambrequin center panel. Typically the center panel is created to include a rod hanging pocket like the side panels, and then a fasten-on panel connector is hung between the panels. You can also use the center panel to create a fasten-on panel connector for wider windows. These fully lined panels are created to include the fasteners the same as the small panel connectors. Today I'm going to show you how to create multi-sections of linked center panels that will fasten between side panels. You can use these for wider window styles rather than using center and panel connectors. To begin, you need to determine your panel size. You can use different sizing lines if you need to cover the space between your side panels. You will use a folded section for the first piece, and I am using a print, so I need to make sure that my print is centered in the middle. If you're using a solid fabric, you can skip this step. You also need to make sure that the folded section is going to be wide enough for your first panel. In my case, I'm using the 18-inch sizing line. Since this fabric section is completely lined, because you'll be attaching fasteners rather than doing a rod pocket, you need to make sure the positioning for your fusible backing is correct. So we may need to add a little on top because we need some depth. You'll need about 5 inches of overlap so that you can connect your fasteners. So position your heat and bond over your print or in the center, and then just fuse that down using a dry iron with a sweeping motion. Cover the entire panel until the glue has completely adhered to the back of your fabric section. I'm adding a second strip of fusible backing across the top to have a little bit more coverage, because even though I'm making a 17.5-inch deep panel, I'm trying to capture my print in the middle of my design form. When you're removing your paper, make sure that you don't pull the glue. When you have double sections, sometimes that can pull the glue when the paper is removed. Then cut a piece of lining that will cover the entire panel and all of the exposed glue. Then, starting in the center with a sweeping motion, just fuse your lining to the back of the glue, the back of your fabric. Take your time with this, using a sweeping motion from the center out to avoid buckling until the lining is completely attached to the back of your fabric section. To make this a joined panel, we're going to do a little creative tracing. So I'm using the 18-inch line for my panels. I'm making 2 that are the same size. Your first panel is going to be positioned on the fold. So you can see that I have enough space, and I'm making sure my print is aligned right smack dab in the center for even placement. And then I'm also making sure that my lower section of my design form is covering the emblem on the bottom so that I capture that. Then I have the excess on top for my fold over and for my fasteners. So I have my 18-inch line. I'm making sure it's falling below the little emblem there so that that's nice and even. I'm positioning that evenly or straight up and down on the fold, and then I have plenty of folded fabric in the back so that when this does open, that's one section of the panel. I will be tracing 2 18-inch sections for a total of 36 inches of width for my panel. So I have my 18-inch line aligned across my fold, and I'm tracing the design form. The reason I'm tracing the right side is because this is going to be flipped and then it's going to be aligned, so I can continue tracing to adjoin 2 scoops for my center panel. So now I'm flipping my design form over and realigning it along that straight line. Otherwise, I won't have a straight panel. So I'm positioning that across my left or across my right side of my traced line, my left side of my reverse design form, and then I'm going to trace the lower section over to my 18-inch marker. So you want to make sure that you don't go any further. Now you can make bigger panels. You can make 2 that are different sizes if you need to cover the section between your side panels, but I'm marking the top and the bottom, and then I'm flipping the design form again to complete my second scoop. I'm aligning my 18-inch line top and bottom so that it's nice and straight, and then I can continue tracing. So that will make a second center scoop. So I'm tracing underneath and then up the side. Now, I could continue with a couple of different dips in the middle. I could go as far as I'd like. This is a single panel at this point because I only made 1 folded section. So I could continue to reverse the form and continue along to make it as wide as I want, but I'm tracing all the way up to the top because I'm only doing 2 sections. So then pin your fabric so that it doesn't move when you cut your panel. and then turn the folded side facing you to begin your cutting. So just follow the trace line underneath your curves and all the way around the bottom. When you get to the outside edge, just cut straight up across the right side all the way up to remove the excess fabric. So then open up your panel with the lining side facing up, and you can see that we need to finish cutting along the left side. So the easiest way to do that is to fold your panel exactly in half, and then you can use your left side as a guide to finish cutting out the panel. Cut straight up the side. So now we just need to straighten out the top section. I need about 5 inches on top for my fold over. I have a print, so I'm just making sure that I cut below where the lining is actually attached to the back, and I can follow my print for a straight line. You can use the design form to trace across the top to get a nice straight line if you need to. So to determine your fastener placement, you need to determine your panel depth. I'm making a 12.5-inch deep panel. That's from the top of the rod down. You can make a shorter panel if you'd like. That would just mean a little bit more fold over, or maybe you take a little excess off the top. The design form top of the rod is 13 inches, so I'm coming down by about a half inch because I happen to like that depth a little bit better. So what we need to do is we need to figure out where to fold our panel. So you measure down or measure up from the curved lower edge. I'm measuring up the 12.5 inches, and that is leaving me 5 inches on top. So in order to make that straight across the top, I'm going to fold my fabric section over and measure down 5 inches. Now in my case, I want to make sure that my print is very straight. So I'm not as worried about 5 inches even in the back as I am the print on the front, because I don't want it to be uneven, but in my case it's pretty straight. So I'm just ironing a crease there so I know where to position my fasteners, and I made sure my print is very straight on top. Your Lambrequin Valance kit includes sticky back Velcro, the hard and soft side, and we're going to position the Velcro across the back of our panel to make our fasteners. We're going to cut sections of fusible backing to hold that Velcro in place. You do need to fuse that down, and then that exposed glue is what you stick your Velcro to. So we need to figure out our placement, and it's going to have to fall below the fold over. And we also have to take into consideration the overlap onto the side panel. So you'll position your center panel over your side panel. You can also add an extra fastener if you'd like on the back of the side panel, but for today we're just going to work on the center panel. So I'm measuring the overlap, and it is about 7.5 inches. So I know that I have to begin placement for my fasteners 7.5, 8.5 roughly inches in from each side, so that they will fasten between the side panels. So now that I know my placement, I'm fusing down my sections of heat and bond, the vertical and the horizontal sections, so that when I fold my panel over, those will attach and connect. So make sure that you've got your placement position figured out before you iron down your fusible backing. So I'm doing 3 strips. I'm doing one that's about 8.5, 9 inches in from each side, and then one right in the center. And then once I've fused that down, I'm removing the paper from each one of the heat and bond sections, peeling the paper off the back of my Velcro sections, and then I'm just sticking that right to the exposed glue. Don't skip this step, because you need that exposed glue in order to have your fasteners hold as you pull on them. Otherwise, they'll just come right off. So always use the fusible backing as an anchor. Okay, for a final step, I'm adding braided gimp trim. This is a flexible trim that's easy to attach, and you just want to measure that off. And then I usually will run my trim under the iron to flatten it out. I'm using Unique Stitch, which is a tube glue. It dries clear. It's really easy to use. So I'm just squeezing a little thin line along the edge. I like to go past each one of the curves. This takes a little while to dry, a minute or so you have a little bit of time. And then I'll do sections. So I always sweep along the lowest curve first so that I can get a nice attachment there before that it starts to dry. So pull your edge piece kind of taut, leave a little excess on top because you're going to secure that behind. Make sure that's nice and straight. You can continue to reposition the glue while it's drying and then get your corners nice and sharp, and then follow the line of your panel so that you make sure that you really show a nice curve. You can always lift it and look behind to make sure that it's nice and straight. Make sure you do all of that before your glue dries, and just keep going over it to make sure it's straight before you move on to the next section. Then just glue the cut edges behind the panel on both sides. Then just hang your beautiful new custom ornate Lambrequin valance. Thank you for joining me, Traceable Designers, and make sure to check back for more helpful videos from Traceable Designer.